Hi everyone and welcome to another video. Today I'm going to talk about the books that I've read in the second half of April, which feels weird because my video about the first half of April just came out last week. Nevertheless, here we are. I've read 4 books and I only have 1 physically, so there's going to be a lot of pictures over here. So the first book that I listened to is The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang, and it's the first volume of the Poppy War trilogy. And The Poppy War is a fantasy book set in a dark military kind of alternative to China. And we meet a young woman called Rin who's an orphan and who's living in a poor province of the country. And in order to escape the life that the people that are taking care of her are planning for her, she starts to cram like an idiot for a test. And when you do well in this test, then you go to a very prestigious military school. This whole world is kind of geared toward the military thing because they're still mourning the previous war. Everything is still kind of because of the previous war, and they're very much gearing towards the next war because there's on the one hand a neighboring country that wants to take over, and the 12 provinces of the country in the book have a lot of tension between them, and they don't like being one country and being under control of the Empress. And the 12 different provinces kind of want to not have to be friends with one another. Anyway, she goes to this very prestigious military school, and you wouldn't have guessed it, but in the first part of the book they kind of talk about, oh, shamanism, but that's not a real thing. Oh, well, we thought it was in the poor province, but that's in the poor province, blah, blah, blah. And then it turns out that shamanism is a thing, but not a lot of people know about it, and the group of people that can do it is teeny tiny. But of course she is one of them, and the shamanism includes some kind of link with the gods. It's also related to drugs, poppy, opium, if you hadn't guessed. So the second part of the book is very much her at the school and discovering that, and then in the third part she is actually in the military and there's a war going on, and it's about her role as a shaman with the other shamans and the rage that comes with things, the power when you are taking on the life of a god and therefore have power, and what it does to you. When are you crazy? When are you not? Dealing with the rage of having your people being completely destroyed. All sorts of stuff like that. It was very dark at parts. There's a whole scene that describes what happens to the city once it's been taken over by the enemy, and the enemy is very gruesome. And I think, but I don't really know, I haven't really researched this, but I think that this story is some kind of a retelling of a war between Japan and China, because Japanese soldiers are also renowned for being completely ruthless. And the country in the book is very big, 12 provinces that happen to correspond to the Chinese zodiacs, and the other one is a small island that has more technology and the people want to break out. So I saw some parallels there. I'm not going to continue with the series because it was a little bit too dark for me, and well, no, I don't really mind that it's too dark, but I didn't really like the military and the war aspect. I didn't expect that to be in there so much. I'm not interested that much in wars. I mean, there's enough bad stuff happening in the world, and fantasy usually kind of takes me out of that, and this one didn't really take me out of that, although I liked some of the discussions that were in there, if that makes sense. So yeah, I'm not going to continue with the series, although I really appreciated how it sucked me in. That was very nice. Then for Invisible Cities, I read By Night the Mountain Burns by Juan Tomás Ávila Laurel, and that is the book that I read for Equatorial Guinea. It was a book that I read on script, and I think that it would have been perfect for an audiobook because it is told in a very oral storytelling kind of way. The narrator talks about his life. I think it's a man, by the way. Yes, it has to be a man. I mean, a boy. On an island in Equatorial Guinea and living in a family with a lot of children and no men around and a very mysterious grandfather. And he talks about a lot of aspects of living on this island and being poor, and traditions and things that happen when people are angry at someone, and how they found food and the life of being on a canoe and growing up without a father. And he talks about some bad things that happened on the island and that made life difficult. The whole book still takes place in his childhood, but you don't really know what age he is or how many brothers or sisters he has or what age, I said that one, what age he is, what his name is. It's like you're sitting at a fireplace and he's just talking about, your grandfather is talking about his youth. The way in which he referenced things, it's sort of like, talks a little about something and then he dives onto something else, and sometimes he goes back to this, or oh, maybe three things that you thought were unrelated do tie in together. And it was very nice, this rhythm that it has to it. It's not the normal rhythm that you have in book or the normal line that you have in book, because oh, this happened, and then it turns out when you continue reading that it's completely unrelated, but other things are related, so you don't really know where it is going. But it give me at least a sense of life on this island and the difficulties, and there's also some other people that come in and then steal all the fish but do give them alcohol and tobacco and stuff. So that was very interesting. I really liked the oral storytelling aspect of it. I thought it's different than the normal things that I read. And though I liked it and I could see what the book was doing and how nice that was, I didn't really like it. For me, it was very difficult for me to stay into the story, because I like stories that are going somewhere, and this one wasn't going somewhere. And though I appreciate it, it didn't really work. For me, at least. But I've talked to a lot of other people that did really like it. But I would still recommend checking it out if you don't mind that there isn't a clear storyline and you like the storytelling aspect, because that is very interesting. The problem that I had is that the next book that I read, which is Unsilent lettre by Mariama Ba, was also a book that didn't really have a clear plot. So in Unsilent lettre, which is a book that is not translated, at least to my knowledge, it's written by Mariama Ba, and she's a feminist Senegalese author. And a si longue lettre means such a long letter, and the main character writes a long letter to her friend, or at least a couple of letters, but they aren't dated, so you don't really know how much time is between the different chapters. And this main character, so she has a husband, has life, blah, blah, blah. Her friend also husband, life, and first her friend's husband decides to take a younger wife, and in the letters we hear about how then the friend reacted to that, and then the same thing happens to the writer. Her husband also takes on a younger wife, and we hear about how she reacted and how her children reacted, and what happens then after her husband passed away, and how other men came in like, oh, well, now you have to marry me, oh, now you have to marry me. And it's about life in Senegal when you're a woman, and it's about being a mother also as well. It was a very interesting book. The first part I had a trouble of getting into because I couldn't really... I'm always trying to see where the book is going, apparently. That helps me to attach myself to the storyline. So it took me a while before I realized that there wasn't going to be that, and that I should just go with the flow. And once I went with the flow in the second half of the book, I really started liking it. I really liked the voice of the main character, and I liked how she reacted versus how her children reacted. And what was interesting to me also is that I read this as part of a book club that reads books from the French-speaking part of the world, and my mother is also part of that book club, and there were some discussions about motherhood that I'd still like to talk to her about, because it's interesting to... There's a whole section when the main character discovers that her daughter is pregnant, and how she reacts to knowing that her daughter is pregnant, that her daughter does not see her mother anymore as the big thing in her life, but that she has someone that she loves, that she's going to have a child, and what that does to her. And that whole chapter was kind of heart-wrenching. It was the poor woman. I mean, if that is what happens to mothers when their children get pregnant, mothers have a very hard life. And I still want to talk about that to her. So it's a short book, and I think it was very nice to discover this author that is doing to a part of Africa what Simone de Beauvoir did to Western Europe. So yeah, if you're interested in that kind of stuff, I would check it out, also if you can speak French. I'm sorry if I'm not explaining things super well, but it doesn't help that the books didn't really have a plot. The last book that I've read is this little chunker, this little brick. It's Emile Zola's Au bonheur des dames. And I love Emile Zola. He's one of my favorite writers. He's a French writer of the 19th century, and he tends to write very descriptively and very accurately describing the world at the time. And in this book, we followed, so the Rougon-Macquarts are two family lines, and we follow one person that is from the Rougon side. It's Octave Mouret, and he's the owner of a very big warehouse store called Au bonheur des dames. And his store is, so it's at the time where usually stores were very small and they were very specialist. So we had a store that is making gloves, another that is making umbrellas, another that is doing bedding sheets. And he has one of these big stores that is growing and that is doing multiple things. And because they have very large quantities, they can buy and therefore also sell at a reduced price. And the main character of this book, because although we follow him and we follow his life, his thoughts, we also meet another young girl who is called Denise, and she comes to Paris with her two brothers from the countryside, and she wants to work for the shop of her uncle. They are orphans. And she ends up, because her uncle is one of the people that has a small store that is being eaten up by the big stores, she ends up working at Au bonheur des dames, and she's very interested by it because these big stores, they were clean, they had lots of light, they were chic, and they were very much in contrast with the store of her uncle, for example, that was small, that was dark, that was not necessarily clean. The contrast is very well written. And so we get her life as a shop girl on the floor and how she's being bullied by the other shop girls because she's from the countryside, blah blah blah. And she catches the eye of Octave Mouret, Monsieur Mouret, and their relationship is part of this story. So this book is very much about the struggle between the small shops and the big shops. It's about how Mouret is building this empire and how he sees women, because the interesting parts, because some of the parts are what happens when his store opens and to the women that come into the store and how they come in like, oh, let's just see, or I just need to buy this little thing, and all the interesting things that he invented to make sure that they spent a lot of money and completely lose control. So we've got that, how he controls women, and that he's doing this because he knows women and that they are weak, blah blah blah. But everybody keeps telling him how one day they will take revenge. And Denise is this girl that is going to take revenge on behalf of womanhood, because she will say no to him and he's not used to that. And it's also about their story in that sense. I really like this. So this love story is what drew me to the book the first time that I read it. I really like the parts between Mouret and Denise and the tensions that is there, because you can ask yourself the question whether it's love, because I'm not going to talk about what she thinks of him, but he wants her, and there's very much desire in there. He's used to just getting what he wants. He's having shop girls left and right, and this one does not bend to his will, and therefore he's intrigued even more. And you can ask yourself, okay, but is this love? Is this just not him being intrigued by something that he doesn't have? And I know that a lot of the people that I read this with, did I say that I read this as part of a read-along organized by Pauline from Dancing Lawn? If I didn't, I am doing this now, and I will link it down below. But I know that the other people that I read this with did not really like the love story between them and asked themselves the question, well, is this really love? But I'm very much on the yes part of that discussion, because I like seeing how the relationship that they have, how it changes, how it evolves, and what her role is in that. So yeah, I really like this book. It used to be my favorite Emile Zola, And I will admit that because of the very, very long descriptions of the shop floor and what happens on the sales day, that was just too much for me. And therefore, this is not my favorite Zola anymore. My favorite Zola is now officially Germinal. I'm not angry at it, it's good to know where I stand. But yeah, this now, I think the difference is also when I was younger, very big description parts, I would just skip over them. It's like, oh yeah, he's describing the shop floor. What? Next page. Oh, he's still doing it. Next page. And now I actually read it. And oh, there was a box of gloves over there. And the descriptions of the clothes. It's just, I don't visualize descriptions. They don't speak to me very much. I do get atmosphere, but I don't get people's clothes or stuff like that. So very big descriptions of the clothing that people can buy, whoop, goes right over my head. Would I recommend this book? So I would recommend this, first of all, if you like slow classics, because this is a very slow one, and there's also very dense descriptions. So if you like that, you'll be happy. I think you'll also like it if you're interested in society at this time and this shop atmosphere, this struggle between little shops and small shops, etc. I mean, I really like it, but I have a small bias towards Emile Zola's work. I'm rambling a little bit already. I'd love to you if you've read any of these books. Once again, I realized that the books that I read are completely different from one another. I mean, we have some feminist, Senegalese, very short letter. We've got an oral storytelling from Equatorial Guinea. We've got a fantasy that is pretty dark and it's very much about war, and we've got a French classic. But this is how I read. See you in the comments. Thanks for watching. Bye.
Ba-chum, ba-chum, chum.